He drove her home just before midnight. She leaned over and kissed him before getting out of the car. She thanked him. He told her to text him when she got inside. She walked up the front steps. The porch light was on. The lights inside were on too. Both of them were still awake. She thought nothing of it. She reached for the door handle and she went inside. She would later describe the moment she stepped into that house as the moment everything shifted. Not immediately, not all at once, but the air was different. She felt it before she understood it. The television was on, but nobody was watching it. Donald was standing in the hallway leading to the kitchen. Biden was seated in the living room. There was something in the way they were positioned, not natural, not the way two people settle into a house on a regular night, that made Kate's chest tighten. She said goodnight. She moved toward the stairs, and that was when everything started to go wrong in ways she would carry with her for the rest of her life. I want you to think about what it feels like to...
How many of you are aware of Kate's sexual assault case? Right? Yeah, she claimed her uncles had sex with her on the 9th of February 14th. That is on Valentine's night, not Valentine's Day. So we're going to unravel the case together and you're going to see exactly how this unfolds, right? It's very horrible, man. Just imagine that on Valentine's Day, your uncles took advantage of you. That's really sad. So let's dive right in.
Kate was 19 years old. She lived in a house with two men she trusted completely, her own uncles, Biden and Donald. She trusted them the way you trust the ground beneath your feet, without thinking, without question. On the night of February 14th, Valentine's Day, Kate came home from a dinner date with her boyfriend. She was smiling when she walked through that door. She thought the night was over. She thought she was safe. She was wrong. What happened inside that house on that cold February night would destroy a family. It would silence a young woman for months, and when the truth finally came out, it would shock every single person who thought they knew these men. Now, before we go any further, I need to say this clearly. What you are about to hear is not a story from a movie. It is not fiction. It is based on real, documented cases of family betrayal that investigators across this country have seen more times than they would like to admit. The names and some identifying details have been changed to protect the privacy of the victim, but the events, the pattern, the silence, all of it is real, and it matters that you know that before we go any further. Kate later told investigators that something happened that night, inside the house she called home, inside the walls that were supposed to protect her. The two men she lived with crossed a line that night, a line that no family member should ever cross. And here is what makes it almost impossible to understand. The next morning, they acted like nothing happened. Biden made coffee, Donald turned on the television, and Kate sat at the kitchen table, staring at...
Before we dive deeper, right, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Stories like this deserve to be told. They deserve to be heard, right? And I really want to know how far this particular case travels. So let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Let's dive right into it.
At the wall, holding it all in, alone. She did not scream, she did not run, she did not call the police. And for months and months after that night, Kate carried what happened inside her like a stone she could not put down. It sat on her chest when she woke up in the morning. It followed her to class. It sat beside her when she ate dinner at that same kitchen table with the two men who had done this to her. And the question that investigators would later ask, the question that would echo through the entire case, was this: how does something like this happen inside a family? How does a 19-year-old girl go from feeling safe to feeling trapped without a single person on the outside noticing? That is the story we are going to tell today, and I promise you, every single minute of it matters. So now you know what happened, But knowing what happened is only the beginning, because the moment you hear a story like this, your mind immediately starts asking questions, and those questions are important. They are the same questions that Kate asked herself every night for months before she finally said a word to anyone. Why did she stay silent? Why did she stay in that house? Why did her parents trust these men in the first place? And why, when the signs were there, when small moments of discomfort had already been happening, did nobody step in? Those questions do not have simple answers, but they do have answers, and they all begin years before Valentine's Day. They begin before that night, before the silence, before the betrayal. They begin with a family that looked, from the outside, completely normal, because that is always how these stories start. Normal, quiet, unremarkable, until it wasn't. To understand what happened to Kate, you have to understand who Kate was. You have to understand the world she grew up in, the family she came from, and the circumstances that led to her moving into that house with Biden and Donald in the first place, because none of it happened overnight. These things never do. There was a road that led to that Valentine night, and if you look closely enough at that road, you can see exactly where it started to go wrong. Rewind. Who was Kate? Kate grew up in a mid-sized city in the American South. Not a big city, not the kind of place where things move fast and people forget each other. The kind of place where everyone knows your last name, where you see the same faces at church on Sunday that you saw at the grocery store on Friday. Kate's mother, Linda, had raised her with a kind of quiet discipline that came from necessity. Her father, Raymond, worked long hours at a logistics company and came home tired most nights. They were a decent family. They worked hard. They paid their bills. They did not have a lot of extra money, but they had enough, and they had each other. Kate was the kind of daughter that made Linda proud without making noise about it. She was not the student who raised her hand the most in class. She was the one who stayed after to help clean up. She was not the loudest person in the room. She was the one everyone somehow ended up confiding in by the end of the night. By the time she turned 18, Kate had already decided she wanted to study nursing. She wanted to help people. That was it. That was the whole plan. Simple, honest, clear. She enrolled at a community college about 40 minutes from where her parents lived. And here is where the first part of the story begins to take shape, because 40 minutes was just far enough to make the daily commute difficult, but not far enough to make it impossible. Kate's parents sat down with her and talked about her options. She could commute, she could find a roommate, or she could stay with family. Family was the obvious choice. Family was safe. Family could be trusted. That is what they believed. Biden and Donald were Linda's brothers. Both of them lived together in a house about 12 minutes from the college. Biden was 51 at the time. Donald was 46. Neither of them had children of their own. They had always been involved in family events, Christmas dinners, birthday parties, 4th of July cookouts. They were uncles in the truest sense of the word, present, reliable, familiar. Biden was the more reserved of the two. He worked in insurance. He drove a clean sedan. He spoke in measured sentences and rarely raised his voice. Donald was the social one. He told the best stories at family gatherings. He grilled the best ribs. He laughed the loudest. He could make a room comfortable in about 4 minutes flat. Together, they seemed like two men who had built a stable, ordinary life. Linda trusted them completely. Raymond, who had always been cautious about everything, agreed that this was fine. This was family. So the plan was set. Kate moved in at the start of the fall semester. Her mom helped her carry boxes into the small guest room at the back of the house. They hung a curtain together, made up the bed with the quilt Linda had bought from a sale, and sat on the edge of it laughing about something small, like a curtain rod wouldn't stay level. Kate hugged her mother goodbye that afternoon and stood in the doorway watching Linda's car disappear down the street. She felt the smallest flutter of nervousness, but she pushed it down. This was fine. These were her uncles. She knew them her whole life. Everything was going to be fine. Think about that for a second. How many of us have moved somewhere new and told ourselves exactly that? Everything is going to be fine, because the people around us were familiar, because we had known them for years, because they were family. Kate did nothing wrong by moving into that house. She made a reasonable decision with the information she had. And I think that's the part of this story that hits hardest, because when you hear what comes next, you realize just how much can be hidden behind a familiar face. The first few weeks were genuinely normal. By all accounts, genuinely normal. Kate settled into a routine quickly. She woke up early, made herself coffee, drove to class, came home, studied at the kitchen table, and went to bed. Biden and Donald respected her space.
They cooked dinner a few nights a week and always made enough for 3. Sometimes the 3 of them watched television together in the evening. It felt like a shared household, easy, comfortable, the way families should feel. Kate called her mom every other night and told her things were good, and she meant it. At that point, she meant it completely. Biden had lived in that house for almost 11 years. He had bought it with a small inheritance after his father passed, and had spent years making it exactly the way he wanted it, organized, clean, minimal. He liked things a certain way, and everybody in the family knew it. He paid the mortgage, he paid the utilities, he decided when the thermostat went up and when it went down. When Kate moved in, he was not unkind to her. He was not hostile, but there was something about the way he ran that household that was just slightly off, the kind of thing that you feel before you can explain it. He had rules, not written rules, not rules he announced, just expectations that he communicated through his presence. Dinner was at 7. The television went off at 10. No guests without letting him know first. These were not unreasonable things on their own, but there was a rigidity behind them, a sense that he was always the one in charge, that Kate noticed almost immediately without being able to name exactly why it made her uneasy. Donald was different in nearly every way. Where Biden was structured, Donald was loose. Where Biden kept his distance, Donald occupied space, loud, physical, constantly in motion. He was the kind of man who patted you on the shoulder a little too often and stood a little too close during conversations. Kate initially chalked this up to his personality. He had always been like that. At family barbecues, Donald was the one circling the yard, hugging everyone, making everyone laugh. It was just how he was, or at least that was how Kate explained it to herself at first. But things started to feel different inside the house, away from the barbecues, away from the crowds, when it was just the 3 of them. That was when Kate started to notice things she could not ignore. It started with comments, small ones, the kind that are easy to dismiss on their own, but start to form a pattern when they keep coming. Donald commenting on what she was wearing before she left for class. Biden watching her from the hallway a beat too long before looking away. A joke that landed wrong and sat heavy in the room afterward. Moments where Kate smiled through something that made her uncomfortable, because what else do you do? You're 19. You're living in their house. You depend on them for a safe place to sleep. You tell yourself you are being oversensitive. You tell yourself it means nothing. You tell yourself that these are your uncles and they would never actually do anything to hurt you. Kate continued going to class. She started dating a young man named Marcus, a quiet, steady guy who was studying business at the same college. He made her laugh. He made her feel normal. When she was with Marcus, she could forget about the tension she felt in the house. She could breathe. She could just be a 19-year-old girl who liked coffee with too much sugar and had a good sense of humor and was trying to figure out her future. Marcus became an anchor for her, a place outside the house where she felt like herself. They had been dating about 2 months by the time February arrived, and on Valentine's Day, he planned something special for her. I want to pause here for a moment and ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where something felt wrong? Not dramatically, not in a way you could easily explain, but just slightly, quietly, persistently wrong, and you kept finding reasons to dismiss that feeling. That is exactly where Kate was at this point in the story. And what makes it so difficult to watch from the outside is that her instincts were right. Every single time something made her uncomfortable, her instincts were correct. She just had no way to act on them. Not yet. By mid-January, the atmosphere in the house had shifted in a way Kate could feel but not describe. Biden had become quieter than usual, but the quiet had a weight to it, like something sitting just beneath the surface. Donald had started making comments that were harder to dismiss, nothing that would hold up in a conversation as clearly inappropriate, nothing Kate could point to and say this is the thing, but enough that she had started going to her room earlier in the evenings, closing the door, sitting with her textbooks even when she wasn't reading them, just putting a physical barrier between her and the rest of the house. She did not tell Marcus about any of this. She did not want to seem dramatic, and honestly, she still half believed she was imagining it. That was the trap she was caught in. Doubt, directed entirely at herself. February 14th started like any other day. Kate woke up at 7:15. She could smell coffee already made. Biden always had it going by 7. She showered, got dressed, and came downstairs to find both of her uncles already at the kitchen table. Donald made a comment about Valentine's Day, something about her having a hot date. Biden said nothing. Kate poured her coffee, said she had to get to class, and left the house before 8. The morning felt ordinary, cold but ordinary. She drove to campus listening to a playlist Marcus had made for her the week before, and felt her mood lift the moment the house disappeared in her rearview mirror. Marcus had planned dinner at a small Italian restaurant about 20 minutes from campus, the kind of place with candles on the tables and bread that came out warm. Nothing extravagant, perfect. They ate slowly and talked about small things, a professor who told the same joke every Tuesday, a road trip they were loosely planning for spring break, the way Marcus's roommate had somehow broken 2 microwaves in a single semester. Kate laughed more that evening than she had in weeks. After dinner, they drove to a late showing of a movie. She could not even remember what they watched afterward, only that she fell asleep on Marcus's shoulder before the last 20 minutes, and he let her. He drove her home just before midnight. She leaned over and kissed him before getting out of the car. She thanked him. He told her to text him when she got inside. She walked up the front steps. The porch light was on. The lights inside were on too. Both of them were still awake. She thought nothing of it. She reached for the door handle, and she went inside. She would later describe the moment she stepped into that house as the moment everything shifted. Not immediately, not all at once, but the air was different. She felt it before she understood it. The television was on, but nobody was watching it. Donald was standing in the hallway leading to the kitchen. Biden was seated in the living room. There was something in the way they were positioned, not natural, not the way 2 people settle into a house on a regular night, that made Kate's chest tighten. She said goodnight. She moved toward the stairs, and that was when everything started to go wrong in ways she would carry with her for the rest of her life. I want you to think about what it feels like to walk into a place you are supposed to feel safe, your home, your family's home, and feel your body react before your mind has caught up. Kate's instincts were screaming at her in that moment. Her body knew, and there was nowhere to go. That is the part of this story that stays with you. There was nowhere else she could turn to. She was in the middle of the night in a house that was supposed to be hers too. What would you have done in that moment? Sit with that for a second.
The night everything changed, Kate told investigators later, in a statement she gave several months after the night itself, that what happened escalated quickly. She used the word trapped. She said she felt trapped before anything physical happened. The way they were standing, the way the exits felt suddenly far away, the way Donald's voice changed when he spoke to her, slower, quieter, heavier. She said Biden said almost nothing. He just stayed where he was, watching. She described it the way people describe moments of shock, like the volume on the world got turned down and everything moved in a way that felt both fast and unbearably slow at the same time. She remembers the television in the background. She remembers the specific sound of the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. She remembers the texture of the wall against her back. Your brain does that when something terrible happens. It holds on to the wrong details, the irrelevant sensory details, because processing the real thing in real time is too much. The men she had known since she was a child, the men her mother trusted, the men who had sat across from her at Christmas dinner and birthday celebrations and Sunday afternoon cookouts. Those men crossed a line that night, a line that does not exist in any world where family means what it is supposed to mean. We are not going to describe what happened in detail. We do not need to, and frankly, that is not what this story is about. This story is about what comes after, because after is the part nobody talks about enough. After is the part that is just as devastating as the event itself, sometimes more. After is where Kate spent the next several months of her life. After is where the real story lives. What happened that night was violent in the most invisible way violence can be, the kind that leaves no marks that anyone outside can see, the kind that makes a 19-year-old girl question her own memory of reality, the kind that makes the people responsible look completely normal in the daylight. And that is exactly what they did. The next morning, Biden made coffee. Donald cracked a joke about the weather. Kate came downstairs, sat at the table, and nobody said a word about the night before. Not a word. It was as if it had not happened, as if she had made it all up. And that silence, that deliberate, casual, terrifying silence, was its own kind of violence. Because what it communicated to Kate was this: nobody is going to believe you. Nobody is going to help you. This is the world you live in now. Sit down, drink your coffee, go to class, and keep your mouth shut. I need to ask you something right now, and I need you to really sit with it. If you were in Kate's position, 19 years old, living in their house, financially dependent on them, with no immediate place to go, what would you have done the next morning? What would you have done the morning after that? Because it is very easy from the outside to say, I would have left immediately, I would have called the police, I would have told someone. But survivors of family abuse tell us over and over again that it is never that simple. Not when the people who hurt you are the same people everyone around you trusts. Not when speaking up means tearing your entire family apart. Not when you are not even sure anyone will believe you. That tension is real, and Kate lived inside it every single day. The days after Valentine's night moved the way days move when you are surviving rather than living. Kate went to class, she came home, she ate, she studied, she answered her mother's calls with, I'm fine, everything is good, delivered in a voice she had to concentrate to keep steady. She texted Marcus small, ordinary things, a meme, a question about homework, a response to something he said, because if she stopped responding normally, he would ask questions she was not ready to answer. She did her laundry on Saturdays and folded it in her room with the door closed. She locked that door every night before she went to sleep. She had not locked it before Valentine's Day. Now it was the first thing she did every evening. Click, lock, exhale. She was still in that house, eating breakfast 10 feet from the men who had done this to her, passing them in the hallway, saying goodnight, living a life that looked from every angle completely normal because she had no other option she could see. Fear is one reason people stay silent after something like this, but it is not the only reason, and it is important to understand the others because they are just as real. Shame was one. Not shame that she had done anything wrong. She had not a single thing, but the shame that comes from being a victim of something deeply private inside a family context. The fear that people will look at her differently. The fear of being the girl who caused a family explosion. The weight of knowing that the moment she told anyone, she could not untell them. There would be sides. There would be people who believed her and people who did not. Her mother's relationship with her brothers would be destroyed. Her parents' marriage would be shaken by the question of how this had been allowed to happen. Her grandmother, who adored Biden and Donald, would be devastated. Kate thought about all of that. A 19-year-old girl carried all of that by herself, alone, in a locked room in the back of that house. Weeks passed. Biden and Donald continued to behave as if nothing had happened. Donald was, if anything, louder and more casual than before, as if the absence of consequences had given him a kind of permission. Biden remained quiet and controlled. Kate continued to exist in the house like a ghost version of herself. She lost weight, not dramatically, just enough. She stopped wearing the bright-colored sweatshirts she used to favor and started defaulting to gray, black, things that took up less space. She moved differently, a little smaller, a little more carefully, the way a person moves when they are always listening for footsteps. Marcus noticed the change but could not name it. When he mentioned that she seemed quiet lately, she told him she was stressed about an exam. He believed her. He had no reason not to. Spring arrived. The world outside warmed up. Students on campus wore short sleeves and sat in the grass between classes. Life moved forward the way life does, indifferent to what any one person is carrying inside. Kate studied for her nursing exams and passed them. She bought her mother a card for Mother's Day and signed it with a small drawing of a flower like she always did. She showed up to a family Easter dinner in late April and sat at a table with Biden and Donald and smiled in photographs alongside them because that was the only version of reality that anyone else could see. And inside that smile, behind those eyes, was a girl who had been screaming for months in a room nobody knew existed.
Psychologists who work with survivors of family abuse have a name for what Kate was experiencing. They call it the disclosure dilemma. The closer the perpetrator is to the victim, the more embedded they are in the family structure, the harder it becomes to speak. Because speaking doesn't just name the crime, it restructures the entire family. Every relationship changes. Every person has to pick a position, and the victim, who is already carrying the heaviest thing in the room, is also the one who has to absorb all of that fallout. Does that seem fair to you? Because it is not. It is one of the most unjust dynamics in the entire landscape of family trauma, and it happens every single day. By late May, almost 4 months after Valentine's night, the weight Kate was carrying had started to become visible in ways she could not fully control. She had always been composed, contained, the kind of person who processed things internally and rarely showed the seams. But there is only so long a person can do that before their body starts to speak for them. She stopped eating full meals and started pushing food around plates instead. She developed a habit of going very still sometimes, mid-conversation, mid-sentence, like something inside her had paused and not fully come back. Her sleep became fragmented. She started waking at 3 in the morning and lying in the dark, heart beating too fast, listening to the sounds of the house around her. She began canceling plans with Marcus, with excuses that were technically true, tired, studying, headache, but layered over something much larger that she could not yet bring herself to name. Marcus was not stupid. He was patient. He was kind. But even the most patient person has a limit on how long they can watch someone they care about disappear without asking why. One evening in early June, Marcus drove to the campus library where Kate was supposed to be studying and found her sitting at a table with a textbook open in front of her, but her eyes fixed somewhere past the wall. He sat down across from her. He did not say much at first. He ordered them both a coffee from the little cart near the entrance. He slid hers across the table, and then he said, quietly, simply, without pressure, "Talk to me. I don't care what it is. You don't have to protect me from it." Kate looked at him for a long moment. She picked up her coffee. She set it back down. And then something in her face, something she had been holding at a careful angle for 4 months, shifted. Her eyes filled. She pressed her lips together, and he waited. She did not tell him everything that night, not all at once. It came out in pieces, halting, uneven, circling around the center without hitting it directly at first. She told him she was not comfortable in the house. She told him that her uncles had done something. She told him that she didn't know how to explain it without it becoming a whole thing. Marcus sat with every piece she gave him. He did not flinch. He did not rush her. He did not immediately say, "We need to call someone," which in that moment would have sent her retreating back behind the wall. He just listened. And when she was done, when she had given him as much as she could give that night, he reached across the table and held her hand and said, "You did not deserve that, none of it, and I'm not going anywhere." That night, Kate cried in a way she had not allowed herself to cry since February. Not quietly, not carefully, the real kind, the kind that shakes you. Marcus sat with her in his car in the parking lot of the library for almost 2 hours. By the time they drove away, nothing had been resolved. No calls had been made, no decisions had been taken, but something had shifted. Kate had said the words out loud to another human being, and those words had not destroyed her.
They had not been met with disbelief or dismissal or the complicated family fallout she had dreaded. They had been met with this boy's hand holding hers in the dark. That moment mattered enormously, more than she could have known at the time. There is research that tells us that the act of disclosure, of telling even one person, is one of the most significant turning points in a survivor's journey. Not because it immediately fixes anything, not because it resolves the situation or guarantees justice, but because it breaks the isolation. It takes what was buried in one person's body and places it, even partially, in the shared space between two people. And that shared space is where healing starts. Marcus was not a professional. He did not know what the right things to say were, but he said the most important thing: you did not deserve that. How long do you think Kate had been waiting to hear exactly that? Over the following 2 weeks, Kate and Marcus had several more conversations. Each one went a little deeper than the last. Kate started to understand, through Marcus's steady, consistent presence, that what had happened to her was not something she needed to continue carrying alone. She researched quietly at the library, reading accounts from other survivors, reading about what reporting looked like, reading about what the outcomes typically were. She was not naive. She knew that reporting family members was not straightforward. She had heard enough stories to know that. But something in her had decided. Maybe it was Marcus. Maybe it was 4 months of sleepless nights. Maybe it was the particular exhaustion of pretending to be fine. Whatever it was, she had made a decision. She was going to tell her mother. That phone call, the one Kate made to Linda on a Wednesday evening in mid-June from a parking lot with Marcus sitting beside her in the passenger seat, that phone call changed everything. Linda's first response, by Kate's account, was silence, a long, breathless silence that lasted several seconds and felt much longer. Then Linda said, "Tell me again." Not because she hadn't heard, but because hearing it once was not enough to make it real. Kate told her again, slower, clearer, every word deliberate. Linda began to cry, not the restrained kind, the kind that comes deep from the chest, from the place where a mother stores her worst fears. She kept saying her daughter's name, just her name, over and over. Kate, Kate, Kate. She asked if Kate was safe right now. Kate said yes, she was outside the house. Linda said she was coming. Kate said okay, and that was the end of the phone call. Linda arrived at Marcus's campus parking lot within 45 minutes. She got out of her car and crossed the space between them and held Kate for a long time without saying anything. When she finally pulled back and looked at her daughter's face, she said something Kate would never forget. "I should have known. I should have felt it." Kate shook her head. "You couldn't have known, Mom." But Linda's guilt was immediate and ferocious, the particular guilt of a parent who trusted the wrong people with the most important person in their life. It would stay with her for a long time. That evening, Linda took Kate back to her home. Kate did not go back to the uncle's house that night. She never lived there again. Within days, Raymond was told, Kate's father. The reaction from Raymond was unlike anything Kate expected. Raymond was a man of very few words. He processed things quietly and revealed almost nothing on his face. But Kate told investigators later that when she told him what had happened, her father got up from the kitchen table, walked outside to the back porch, and stood there for almost 20 minutes by himself. When he came back inside, his eyes were red. He sat back down, he held Kate's hands across the table, and he said, "We are going to handle this. You are not going to be alone in this for one more day." The decision to contact authorities was made not long after.
How do you think you would react if you were in Linda's position, or Raymond's? Because I think it is easy to assume we know what we would do. But the truth is that hearing something like this about people you have known and trusted your whole life is a kind of collision with reality that very few of us are ever prepared for. Linda had to reckon not just with what had happened to her daughter, but with her own role in placing Kate in that house. That is an enormous weight. And yet she carried it without flinching. She got in the car. She showed up. That matters.
When a family secret of this magnitude surfaces, it does not stay contained. It moves through a family the way water moves through cracks, finding every weak point, widening every division that was already there, forcing choices that people spend their entire lives avoiding. The news about Biden and Donald reached the extended family in waves. First, it was Linda's closest sister, Janet, who wept on the phone and said she believed Kate without hesitation. Then it reached two cousins who were close to Biden. Then it reached Kate's grandmother, a woman in her mid-70s, who had built her identity around being the center of a close, functioning family. Her response was one of the most painful parts of the entire ordeal. She did not immediately believe Kate. Or rather, she could not. The version of her sons that Kate was describing was so incompatible with the version she had lived alongside for 50 years that her mind simply could not reconcile them. She said things in those early days that cut Kate deeply, not out of malice, out of a desperate, terrified inability to process the collision between two realities she could not hold at the same time. Some relatives rallied around Kate, others pulled back. Some said nothing at all, and that silence, that absence, was its own kind of message, one Kate heard clearly. Investigators came to the house. They interviewed Biden and Donald separately. Both men initially denied everything. Biden was composed, measured, carefully cooperative, the way he was with everything. Donald was defensive, then dismissive, then volatile. He called Kate's allegations a misunderstanding. He suggested she had been confused by the events of the night. He spoke about his years of dedication to the family, his relationship with Kate, everything he had done for her. The investigators had heard versions of this before. They continued their work. Neighbors were interviewed. Kate gave a formal recorded statement, sitting in a room with a trained forensic interviewer, going through every detail of February 14th in the measured, careful way you can only do when you have had months to understand what you experienced. It took a long time. It was exhausting in a way that only people who have done it understand. But Kate sat through every minute of it. She was clear. She was steady. She was 19 years old, and she sat in that room and she told the truth. The investigation produced enough for charges to be filed. When the charges became official and the news of the arrest spread through the community, the family fracture became permanent in some places. There were people who had known Biden and Donald for decades, friends, former colleagues, church members, who struggled to reconcile the men they knew with what they were now being charged with. This is one of the most consistent and most painful features of cases involving trusted family members. The perpetrators have, by necessity, built lives that look entirely normal. They have friendships, histories, reputations, and all of those people, the ones who believed in the normal version, have to go through their own reckoning when the truth arrives. Some of them handle it with grace. Some of them do not. Some of them never fully make the journey. And the victim watches all of it happen, while still carrying the original wound, while still trying to heal. I want to ask you something that I think is worth sitting with for a moment. When a case like this becomes public, there are always people who say, "But he seemed so normal. He was always so kind. I never would have guessed." And I understand why people say that, because the dissonance is genuinely enormous. But I want you to think about what it feels like to be the survivor in those moments, hearing the people around you struggle to believe what happened because the person who did it was charming or reliable or funny or familiar. Kate heard those things.
And every single time someone said, "I can't believe it was him," she heard the echo of, "I can't fully believe it was you." That is an impossible thing to survive alongside everything else, and yet, Kate survived it. Kate finished her first year of nursing school, then her second. She moved into an apartment with two female classmates she trusted, people she had chosen, not inherited. She decorated it with plants she kept alive and photos she picked herself, and a small string of lights above her desk that she turned on every morning while she had her coffee. She called her mother every other day.
She and Marcus stayed together through the hardest part of it and eventually went their separate ways. Not from damage, but from the natural drift that happens between two young people growing through something enormous. They parted well, with gratitude, the kind of ending that is actually a beginning. Kate was in therapy. She went twice a week for the first year and then once a week after that. She did the work, the real kind, not the kind that makes you feel better immediately, but the kind that slowly changes the architecture of how you understand yourself and what happened to you. Both Biden and Donald were charged. Both were convicted. Both received sentences that placed them behind bars. And the house, that house with the porch light on, sat empty. Kate gave a victim impact statement at the sentencing. She stood up in that courtroom, 20 years old by then, 1 year older, 1,000 years wiser, and she read from a piece of paper she had written herself, in her own words, without anyone's help. She talked about the girl she had been before Valentine's night. She talked about what she had lost and what she had fought to get back. She talked about the months of silence and what they had cost her. And then she said something that the court reporter would later tell a colleague she thought about for weeks. She said, "I am not standing here because I want you to feel something for me. I am standing here because I want every person in this room to know that staying quiet is not the same as being okay. And speaking up, no matter how late, no matter how hard, is always worth it. It was worth it for me, and it will be worth it for the next person, and the one after that." Kate's story shocked the people who heard it, not just because of what happened, but because of who was responsible, because of how ordinary the surface of it looked, because of how long it took for the truth to find the light, and because of how clearly it shows us something we would rather not think about, that the people who hurt us are not always strangers. They are not always monsters who look like monsters. Sometimes they are the people who make coffee in the morning, the ones who grilled ribs at the cookout, the ones your parents trusted, the ones you trusted, the ones whose names you knew before you knew your own address. Sometimes the deepest betrayal comes from inside the house, from inside the family, from inside the exact place that was supposed to be the safest. And that truth is hard to hold, but it is the truth. And Kate, 19 years old, nursing student, girl with a quilt her mother bought on sale, she held it, she carried it, and then she put it down, not by forgetting, but by speaking. If you are watching this and something in Kate's story felt familiar, not as a viewer, but as a person, please know that what she found is available to you too. Speaking is possible. Help is real, and you are not required to carry anything alone forever. If you know someone who may be in a situation where they feel trapped and unable to speak, be the person who says, "Talk to me. I don't care what it is. You don't have to protect me from it." Those words changed Kate's life. They can change someone else's too. That is why stories like this one matter. Not to frighten, not to shock, but to remind us that the truth, however painful, is always stronger than the silence that tries to keep it buried. Kate is doing well. She is still studying nursing. She still has plants on her windowsill. She still makes coffee every morning, and every single day she chooses to keep going. That is what courage actually looks like. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, daily, unstoppable forward movement, one day at a time. Thank you for watching this entire story. It was not an easy one to tell, and I know it was not an easy one to sit with, but you stayed, and that means something. Before you go, I want to ask you one final question. After everything you just heard, after Kate's story, after her silence, her courage, her impact statement, what do you think made the biggest difference in her journey?
Was it Marcus? Was it her parents showing up? Was it her own decision to finally speak? Leave your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what this story meant to you. And if you or anyone you know needs to talk to someone, please reach out to the RAIN hotline at 1-800-656-4637. They are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, always. If you are new here, welcome. Click that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. We cover real stories, real people, real truths, every single week. And we will see you in the next one.
So if you like stories like this and you enjoy the awareness we create here, don't forget to subscribe. Subscribing helps us grow and it helps you get notified when we drop our next videos. I'm hoping to see you on the next one. So click this subscribe button now.